Hello there.
Hey,
How are
can you
you?
see me?
I certainly can.
Excellent.
All right. Am I coming through on all
You're coming through.
wonderful.
How's the connection? All right?
Wonderful. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Um, I'm really happy you decided to come on here today. This is fantastic. Um, I
Thanks
I
for
asked
having
this.
me.
Oh, absolutely. I always ask everyone the same question at the outset because it seems to like really cut through to what that person is really about. That question being, what inspires existential dread in you?
Wow. Um, to be honest, the late stage capitalism we're living in right now,
Yeah,
um, just feels like we're being hung, drawn, and quartered, you know, at the mercy of the ruling class above making all of these inane decisions, and not even recently, but just over the course of the past couple hundred years, just really got us in a tight spot. And when you have kids and
mm,
mouths to feed, you're really at the mercy of other people's choices. And if I think about it too much, that tends to make me spiral into the yawning jaws of the void.
it becomes very Stygian, especially considering, we thought we'd sort of sloughed off the last, emperor's new clothes type individual in our previous president. And unfortunately, that doesn't really seem to be the case because it doesn't matter, it seems, what hat they decide to wear. They're all pretty much in service of the corporate elite, which is absolutely and utterly terrifying to me. But
Yeah, that's the
um,
system, man. It's two wings of the same dove, and we have this misconception that voting one way or another is going to make any true fundamental changes to that system. It's not. I mean, it's important, I think, to make sure that equal rights are maintained throughout all minorities and things like that. And so you do have to vote in a way to ensure that those rights are protected. But at the same time, when you see what's happening in the Middle East and many other places and our policies out there, you see that we're just bullies, man. I mean, we're like the number one arms dealer in the world. We're the mafia. And anybody who like raises a voice against that is treasonous. Anyway, I don't know where you stand on all this shit, so I don't know if
I'm exactly where you're at, and
all right, we're good then.
yeah, yeah. And to be honest, that was the the main thrust of punk rock for me as a kid. Like
Yeah.
my first concert was the Clash opening for the Who. My father had taken me. I was very young.
What?
Yeah, eh,
Jealous.
yeah. Don't be jealous. I'm old. That's it. I'm just old. But the fact is, the politics of Joe Strummer really reached me. And having had parents who, my father was a Vietnam veteran, afterwards became a hippie. My parents were hippies. Their politics, or lack thereof, really inspired the whole punk ethos into me before I knew what that really entailed.
Yeah.
And, going and living in squats and things of that nature. I mean, you can do that, sure. But like you said, when you're married and have mouths to feed, as we both do, sometimes that doesn't make sense. And unfortunately, you have to kind of exist within that construct. And trying to do it mindfully is very tenuous. It's a very difficult undertaking to do it with a conscience. And
Yeah.
someone as prolific as yourself, musically, artistically, how do you kind of how in parlance of that, how do you make that make sense for yourself?
It comes in waves, man. If I'm honest, it's really hard. I mean, there's times where I literally have to just hunker down and be dad and just shelve that stuff, as painful as it is. Like I know if I go for like a week, for instance, without making music or playing guitar, man, I am spiritually constipated, you know,
Yeah.
and it comes out in, you know, snappy ways, and I have to remind myself, oh yeah, you have to keep that root to my version of spirituality is my connection to the arts, you know, and if you cut the spiritual root, whatever that is for you, you just become a thing, you know. But yeah, it comes in waves. I mean, it just made me think of, there's this great documentary you've probably seen called The Other F Word.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
which kind of delves into some of this stuff a little bit. It's like, what is selling out, and when you do have mouths to feed. And The Other F Word, for listeners who haven't seen it, is fatherhood, and it's seen through the eyes of like Lars Fredrickson, lead singer Pennywise, a couple
Yeah,
other
Jen
cats.
Wenberg. Yeah.
Yes, and it kind of delves into these issues, like how do you maintain that ethos and get paid, you know,
Yeah.
and look out for your family. I mean, my issue sometimes is like, because of my knowledge of world politics and affairs and the government, and my challenge is sometimes just keeping my trap shut, you know, with my kids, because there's so much I want, especially my eldest, to know about the world. But it's like they have to find these things on their own sometimes, you know. And if they get into too argumentative of a headspace too young, I think it can maybe have some bad results, you know, and how they're accepted and embraced in society, and can maybe make them a little too far in that direction of senseless anarchy, I suppose,
Yeah.
because they don't quite fully understand the nuance of that shit. But yeah, as far as me, it's like, I just, you know, I've maintained a pretty fiercely independent standpoint as far as my music goes, and that's been important to me, is having, and a lot of that came from my punk rock roots, you know, and Discord Records and how they ran things,
Mhm.
Maximum Rock and Roll, and the people's voice and community and the importance of that, but also like handwritten lyrics and stuff that makes you feel connected to the artists in a non-corporate way. And you know, it's something I do hope to maintain. But at the same time, it's like the weight on your shoulders when you're independent, where you're having to really do all of your own PR and sell your own tickets and stuff like that. It is exhausting. And when you have a family, it's like, God, I wish I had some kind of label support sometimes to be able to take some of the burden off. But what's the price, you know? So I'm kind of often in that middle ground of, do I pursue working with a label? I mean, there's great labels that actually are artist centric, and you know, maybe I could pursue. Or do I maintain that completely independent stance and just put out shit when I want to put it out, and stay passionate about it, you know? Because the thing is, once you have the expectation of having to put stuff out all the time, um, it has the capacity to kill that drive sometimes, you know?
Oh, especially
So,
since, in this day and age, we have so many examples of artists who have struck out completely and utterly on their own, from punk rock to Prince, and
mm,
they've made it work, and they've made it economically viable. Whereas when you get into that system of record labels, you're actually taking the droppings. You're being served the leftovers, whereas they take the lion's share of everything you generate. So
yeah.
I mean, tour support's great, but not in a 360 deal culture. And
Hmm.
for people who don't know, the 360 deal is the record label gets a piece of everything: the tour, the merchandising, the record itself, and you're actually in their pocket then. Anything they give you as far in the way of tour support or the like is basically a loan that
Mm,
you're indentured to pay back. So
yeah.
bearing that in mind, I think you're absolutely on the right track, especially if
Mm,
you want to own your masters and be your own master. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? And I
Master.
obey your master. But I think you've been doing a very good job of it. I mean, it seems like your storefront and the like is very concise. You can get everything from tickets to your merchandise. It's all right there. You know what I mean? So it's like an insular. It's its own label almost. You have your own little
Yeah.
microcosm, and I wish I had the wherewithal to do that for myself.
Well, it's not all me. I have my main man, Danny Keir, in London, and he's my music manager there, but he's also my best friend. So we make all decisions together. He helps to push me when I need a push, and
Mhm.
offers up suggestions for things that I often say no to. But it's a very kind of give and take and group dynamic. And I think a lot of artists' temperaments really struggle with the business aspect of things, and that's something that
Yeah.
I really do. I'm insanely disorganized, except when it's go time. Then I'm a sprinter. I know how to put everything in a row and get it done. But in the meantime, in the interim, I'm a fucking mess. I have such a hard time like keeping all my ducks in a row when I don't have a finite goal to focus on. But when I do, yeah, Pitbull. But yeah, no, I owe so much to him. I mean, I don't think I would have pursued um, music publicly. Um, maybe I would have, but I definitely wouldn't have at that time if it wasn't for him. So it's important to have good people in your corner that understand what artistic integrity is and aren't just looking to make money and sell candy to the kids,
Right.
because I feel like that's where music's at right now. It's selling candy bars. What's the new cool rapper we can put on the same fucking chocolate?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I'm interested in the quality of the chocolate, not what it looks like. I'd be happy with a brown paper wrapper as long as when you take a bite out of it, it's fucking quality.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's always been my perspective. I'm not into bells and whistles. I like minimal-ish production, just stuff that is there for a reason, and when you take it out, you miss it. Um, eh, yeah, and servicing the song. It's all about the song. If you've got a good song, you got it. And I think when you strip away a lot of the bells and whistles in modern day chart music, there's not a song really. You know what I mean? Or it's a lame song
Yeah.
that's just been
Absolutely.
dressed up with amazing backing vocals and symphonies and stuff, so everybody can get that emotional connection. But once you take that away, what's the actual true deep meaning behind it? It's just a
Absolutely.
fucking love song, you know,
And that's
another fucking
kind
love song.
what's so wrong? What's wrong with that?
Nothing wrong with another fucking love song, but you know what I mean, you
Yeah.
know.
But what I'm saying is like, the Beatles of it all. Like they wrote a million love songs and they were all really, really fucking good.
Yeah.
It's in the quality of, the workmanship in the craft.
Hmm.
And I think with your records, there's, as you'd said, the production service is the songs, but there's a very crisp, very dark, deep tonality to it all. The sonic palette is very blue and purple to me. Like I'm synesthetic. I think of notes in colors. A lot of musicians do, but
Hmm.
uh, I get a lot of very from Tom Waits to Leonard Cohen to Nick Cave, dark blue and purple vibes from your music because it does have that. Number one, you have that voice, that really dark, raspy, beautiful voice, but there's intention behind the lyrics. You're not just really writing silly love songs like the Beatles said. Well, like Paul McCartney said, there's more to it. There's a lot of struggle that I pick up on, and a lot of longing. I think Strays, there's a lot of longing throughout all five of those songs, you know, um, and I think that's something that's very relatable, no matter what the genre is, no matter what be it pop music, call it whatever you like. There's something to be said about the universal recognition of longing in another spirit. And I think that's really what you've been encapsulating with your records.
Well, there's not an English word that encapsulates that, but there's a German word, Sehnsucht, which is actually a Rammstein album,
Yeah.
but which is kind of that existential longing, and you can't quite put into words. But it's interesting that we don't quite have a word for that here. The Portuguese word is saudade. Saudade. I don't know how to pronounce it, but yeah, I suppose that's in a way where all this stuff comes from. It's grappling with the existential void, like you said, and by that, in this time, I don't necessarily mean capitalism, but
Right.
just that kind of longing or something, and it's just music saved my life, and I suppose every time I make a record, it saves my life. But yeah, it's one of those things where I just do it because it just feels, it's just ingrained in me. And I mean, it goes all the way back to punk rock as well for me, like we started talking about.
Mm-hmm.
When I first found punk rock, I was a young little misfit, had barely any friends, and when I found the punk rock community, it was just the most accepting community of all different types of people, all different sexualities, races, creeds, whatever. Everybody could come together and just live their life and say fuck you to anybody telling us we need to homogenize. And as a shy kid, I needed that to break open, because I felt so constrained, especially living in Ohio and growing up there. But I grew up in Yellow Springs. I don't know if you've been there, but
Yeah.
it's a little hippie town. Where are you based anyway?
I'm from the Scranton area of Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. So Midwest as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you get it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
where I was going with that.
Well, just that community kind of ties into the longing. You're longing for something. You're longing for someone to hear you. I mean, I think that the community based, or at least what it had been when I got into the hardcore scene in the 80s, it was a place where people who didn't, they were the puzzle pieces that were left over, the ones that didn't fit here, there, or anywhere else. So they needed a box to be put into. And it seemed to me that these were the people who wouldn't care that I was an awkward, goofy looking 12-year-old with no real friends. And, that's how I got into doing graffiti. Just like you and I have a lot in
Yeah.
common, actually, with the passing graffiti art. I was a clerk in a record store for many years. But it was these places where I found things like graffiti, like playing music, like just finding different ways to let the world know, hey, here I am. And it seems like in that community, it was that fostered that in a really important, really familial way for me. And I think it's pretty amazing that the major band that you were known for in that sphere is coming back for a few shows and for a recording, if I'm not mistaken. Shadyside, correct?
Yeah, well, we just cut the new record. We did 5 new songs on an EP, and we will be putting that out as soon as, well, we're basically, vinyl plants are all backed up to all hell. It's a disgraceful situation. But what you gonna do? So I mean, we'd have it out by now, but we're having to wait till a lot later. But I'm hoping to have at least the first single out in the fall. But yeah, it was an exciting thing. I mean, it all started actually here in Atlanta when I went to Wrecking Ball Music Festival, which is an incredible fest with tons of punk, hardcore, emo bands. And this is, I don't know how many years ago, 5 or 6, but there's been a massive resurgence in this kind of music lately, with not only those bands getting back together and doing a new record. Like you see, you have that Cave In record behind you there.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing.
Bands like that, heavyweights that are coming back and putting out incredible stuff again, but also newer and younger generation groups that are like discovering these records for the first time and like paying homage to them in their own way. And there's some great new stuff coming out. Anyway, I was at this festival with a few buddies, including Tim and Earl.
Mm-hmm.
And just being a part of a fest again and seeing all these bands like I used to back in the day, you know, out in the sun, and being with some old buddies from Ohio, my buddy Chris N as well, who you may be familiar with, was there. And Tim was like, "Hey, you got to get Shadyside back together." And he kind of first put the bee in my bonnet about it, you know. And because I'd talked to the guys about bringing them down, I was like, "Yo, you should get an Airbnb and let's go see some of these bands, you know, that we used to love." And they couldn't make the trip. But anyway, I kind of started thinking, and I was like, "Hey, if you guys ever scrape together some instrumentals, send them my way. We can do a Postal Service style collaboration, and I'll just throw some lyrics down." And it took a while. It took until COVID hit, when I started getting desperate to do something, you know, different, because some heavy self-analysis came our way, didn't it, the past couple of years for all of us? But, you know, I just had this desire to fucking scream again and do some music that's a little more rabble-rousing and like, not necessarily for the kids, but for the kids, you know, like people that even are kids in their hearts. And anyway, they ended up sending me several tracks together. I picked the ones that I thought I could roll with and recorded them here in my garage. Sent demos back and forth, you know, notes here and there. And then we cut the record earlier this year, I believe. And yeah, so we thought we'd throw together a couple reunion shows, get our feet back in the pond, and kind of just start that little buzz again and get people ready for a new record coming. And who knows what the future holds, you know? I mean, I'd love to keep making music when I can in this vein. So, you know, if they're down and they want to keep sending stuff, we'll put some more shit out. But for the time being, we've got a 5-song EP in the pipeline. We're just waiting on the test pressings to get to the next step of getting it in line for the actual pressing.
Right.
And 2 reunion shows on the 9th and the 11th of June. So yeah, it'll be a bunch of old friends, bands and stuff, and hopefully get some of the old cats out of the woodwork and maybe some new cats as well who are interested to see what it's all about.
It's pretty awe-inspiring to me too that you get to scratch these 2 vastly dissimilar itches with your music. Because I mean, not that they're that dissimilar, but you know, you have this melodic, screamy, well, screamo, emo, whatever tag you want to put on it. There's been a million. It's all punk to me, but to have that
line there, punk to me.
It's all punk to me. But the other end of the spectrum is the almost unclassifiable songwriting that you do under your own name that it scratches a very different itch, in my opinion. But they're the same heart, the same spirit. One's just a lot crazier than the other, you know.
Yeah.
To have the outlets to have both heard is pretty amazing. Take
Well,
all
also
that.
the fun thing about this particular Shadyside EP is I wanted to approach things slightly differently. You know, I've done a lot of hard living between now and when the band broke up, in good ways and bad ways. You know, it's a process. But I wanted to approach it vocally slightly differently. And the Shadyside of old was very much a singing and screaming separate type thing, you know, early 2000s metalcore inspired type shit, you know. And a lot of singing up in the highest register I could muster because I thought that's what was cool at the time, you know,
Mhm.
and that's what I had to do, you know, is push it to the limit. And obviously with my solo stuff, it's all very Bill Callahan range. You know, I like to
Yeah.
keep it. I don't like to work too hard. You know, if I can help it. I mean that in a good way. Um, but I wanted to approach this vocal because I was like, I can't sing like that anymore, nor do I want to.
Right.
So I kind of have settled for a more mid. I mean, it's more in the vein of like, you know, Planes Mistaken for Stars, hot water music, kind of
Yeah.
yelling, screaming, with screaming as well, you know. But it's just a little more in your face and straightforward. And also like lyrically, the Shadyside stuff was a lot more in of old, was a
Mhm.
lot more psychedelic, beatnik inspired, you know.
Yeah.
And whereas I wanted it to be more straightforward, you know, like I mean the records uh, not totally about this, but a lot of it is about kind of like fear and aspects of that and self-realization, I suppose. I don't fucking know, but it's just got that kind of old school punk rock, straight up vibe to it, you know, which was fun. I want to be heard, and I want people to understand what is being talked about, you know. Whereas
And
before, nobody knew what the fuck I was singing about, you know.
then I know exactly what you mean. Every band I was in up until, like, 2010, I was screaming my balls off, and
Yeah,
no one would know, what I was talking about. It sounds cool, he's pissed. Go.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and there's a place for that. I mean, like, I feel like, and this is how I always felt about hardcore metal is like the voice is it's another instrument. You know, if you can tap into the lyrics, cool. But sometimes when you do, you don't like it. I mean, there's like some of these like super death metal bands that I love the sound of, and I read the lyrics and I'm like, ooh, uh, are you really into that? Like
Yeah.
cutting up corpses and stuff. Like it was a lot cooler when I didn't know that.
Yeah.
uh, but no, I mean, like Converge is probably my all-time favorite heavy group, and I never knew what the hell he was singing about when I first got into that band. And luckily, when I did, it was super poetic and incredible lyrics as well, which was not the case for a lot of the contemporaries to that level of artistry on the lyric front.
Yeah.
Um, but it didn't matter is the point. You know, when I first heard that record behind you, Jane Doe,
Yeah.
was my first introduction to Converge. You know, I came slightly later, but hearing Concubine and straight away I was like, what is this? And it was almost like it did not matter what he was screaming. It was like on this level that it was adding symphonic elements to the song where it was just emotional and piercing. And so, you know, there's a place for that as well. But yeah, I wanted to approach this project in a way that was a little more heard, I suppose, you know.